The crystal city of Zephyr Prime floated like a jewel in the orange clouds of the gas giant's upper atmosphere. Its towers gleamed with soft blue light, each structure grown from living crystal that sang gentle melodies in the wind. For 3,000 years, the Zealothi had lived in peace among these floating islands. Their civilization built on art, music, and harmony with nature. High Counselor Vexera stood at the center of the emergency council chamber, her translucent blue skin flickering with patterns of deep distress. Around her, dozens of other Zealothi floated in their ceremonial circles, their usual calm shattered by the terrible news that had reached them from the outer system. "The bioships have been confirmed," she announced, her voice carrying the musical quality of her species but weighted with fear. 12 massive vessels, each the size of a small moon. They bear the markings of the Krex horde. A wave of terrified chittering swept through the chamber. The Zealothi had heard whispers of the Krex from other species they traded with. Stories of worlds stripped bare, populations enslaved or consumed, entire civilizations erased from existence. The Krex were not conquerors in any traditional sense. They were a plague that devoured everything in their path. Elder Quinum, the oldest of their kind at nearly 4,000 years, floated forward on his anagraph platform. His ancient form was more crystal than flesh now, his body slowly transforming into the same material as their cities. "How long do we have?" he asked. 7 solar cycles, replied sensor technician Maltha from her position at the monitoring station. "Perhaps 8 if they stop to harvest the asteroid belt first." The council chamber erupted in panic. Zealothi voices rose in harmonious wails of despair. Some spoke of evacuation, others of surrender, but all knew the truth. Their ships were designed for trade and exploration, not escape from determined predators. Their technology was focused on creation and growth, not destruction. "We have no weapons," cried Counselor Zeppin, his young voice breaking with emotion. "We have never needed weapons. We know nothing of war. Our shields are designed to protect against radiation and small debris," added Chief Engineer Morden. "They would not stop a determined attack from warships." Vexara raised her hand for silence. The chamber gradually quieted, though the fear patterns still flickered across every Zealothi face. "There must be options we have not considered. Our ancestors faced challenges before." "Different challenges," Quinum said softly. "Natural disasters. Resource, shortages, disease. Never anything like this. The Krex do not negotiate, they do not show mercy. They exist only to consume." For long moments, the chamber was silent, except for the gentle humming of the crystal walls. Then, in the back of the room, young Archivist Nixella spoke up. "What about the mercenary species?" All eyes turned to her. She was barely past her first century, considered a child by Zealothi standards. But her work in the historical archives had given her access to information most had forgotten. "The old databases speak of warrior species," she continued, her voice growing stronger. "Beings from the Outer Rim who sell their military services to others. Perhaps we could hire them to protect us." Vexera felt a spark of hope. "Tell us more," Nixella activated a holographic display showing star charts and data streams. "There are several species mentioned in the trading records. The Korthok battle clans, the hegemony war fleets, and something called humans from a system designated as Sol 3. "What do we know of these humans?" asked Quinum. "Not much," Nixella admitted. "The records show they are from a world classified as stable and temperate. They have been expanding into our region of space for the past 50 years. They seem to have advanced technology and organized military forces." Chief Engineer Morden studied the data. Their ships show sophisticated design, multiple weapon systems, heavy armor, advanced engines. They appear to be a militaristic species. But are they civilized? Vexera asked. This was the crucial question. The Zealothi had no desire to trade one set of monsters for another. "The database suggests they are," Nixella replied. "They engage in trade, follow diplomatic protocols, and have established peaceful relations with several species. They seem to be exactly what we need, advanced warriors with moral principles." The council debated for hours. Some argued for attempting to evacuate their population. Others suggested trying to negotiate with the Kreks, but as the debate continued, it became clear that hiring human mercenaries was their only realistic option. "Very well," Vexara finally declared. "We will attempt to contact these humans. What do we know of their communication methods?" Communications specialist Corvin activated his equipment. "I have located what appears to be a military frequency. The signal patterns match those used by organized fleet commands. What can we offer them?" asked Counselor Zephin. Vexara gestured to the crystal walls around them, our entire planetary wealth. "The energy crystals that power our cities. The rare minerals we have harvested from the gas giant's core, the artistic treasures we have created over millennia. Everything we have, in exchange for our survival." The message was crafted carefully over the next several hours. It needed to convey their desperate situation while also demonstrating their ability to pay for military assistance. The Zealothi had no experience with hiring mercenaries, but they understood the basic concept of exchange. "Greetings, noble human warriors," the message began. "We are the Zealothi of the Crystal Reach, located in the Zephyr Prime system. We face immediate annihilation from a hostile force known as the Krex Horde. Our peaceful civilization has no military capabilities to defend against their attack." The message went on to detail their offer, describing the vast wealth of their crystal cities and the rare resources they could provide. It emphasized the urgency of their situation and their willingness to pay any price for protection. "We have located your military communication frequency through our databases," the message continued. "We understand that your species possesses advanced warfare capabilities and organized fleet commands. We humbly request your assistance in this desperate hour." Corvin reviewed the message one final time. "Seems appropriate," he said. "Respectful, but clear about our needs." "Send it," Vexara ordered. The transmission shot out across the galaxy. Carrying the hopes and fears of an entire civilization, it traveled through hyperspace relays and communication networks, searching for the human military frequency it had been programmed to find in the hours that followed. The Zealothi prepared for the worst, while hoping for the best. They had taken the first step toward salvation, but they had no idea what kind of beings they had just contacted. The humans they had called for help were not the civilized warrior diplomats they imagined. They were something far more dangerous. They were the product of a world that had spent millions of years trying to kill them, and they had not only survived, but thrived. They were predators from a death world, and they were about to answer the call, as the Zealothi waited for a response. Monitoring the approach of the Krex bioships, they could not have imagined the chain of events they had set in motion. They had sent their message to what they thought were refined military professionals. Instead, they had contacted the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The die was cast. The message was sent. Soon, the peaceful crystal cities of Zephyr Prime would witness the meeting of two vastly different species, and the galaxy would never be quite the same. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair aboard the UES Vengeance, sipping his morning coffee and reviewing the latest patrol reports. The human expeditionary fleet had been mapping the outer spiral arm for 6 months, establishing early warning stations and making contact with new species. It was routine work, but Jake preferred it to the political games back on Earth. The Bridge of the Vengeance was a study in controlled chaos. Officers moved between their stations with practiced efficiency, while holographic displays showed star charts and sensor readings. The ship itself was a heavy cruiser, built for long-range operations and designed to handle whatever the galaxy might throw at them. "Captain," called communications specialist Lisa Chen from her station. "I'm picking up something unusual. Long-range transmission on military frequency 7. Jake set down his coffee cup. Origin: unknown system. About 4 days travel at maximum jump speed. The signal is clean, but the language patterns are completely foreign." Lisa frowned at her displays. "Sir, I think this might be a first contact situation that got everyone's attention. First contact protocols were serious business in the human fleet. New species could mean new allies, new enemies, or new problems. Jake stood and walked over to Lisa's station. "Play it back," he ordered. The alien voice that filled the bridge was unlike anything they had heard before. It had a musical quality, almost like singing, but the translation software managed to render it into understandable English. As the message played, Jake's expression grew more serious. "They're asking for military assistance," said Commander Ryan Phillips, Jake's second in command, "against something called the Krex Horde. They're offering significant payment added." Chief Science Officer Dr. Maya Patel, studying the technical data embedded in the transmission. "The energy signatures from these crystals they mention are incredible. We're talking about power sources beyond anything in our current technology." Jake reviewed the message again. The aliens called themselves Zealothe and claimed to face annihilation from hostile forces. They had somehow located human military communications and were requesting immediate assistance in exchange for their entire planetary wealth. "What do we know about this Krex Horde?" Jake asked. Intelligence Officer Tony Rodriguez pulled up files on his workstation.
Limited data, sir. We have some reports from trading posts in the Outer Rim.
Bioships, strip mining operations, complete destruction of inhabited worlds. They seem to be some kind of nomadic destroyer fleet. In these Zealothe, nothing in our databases? This would be genuine first contact. Jake studied the star charts. The Zealothe system was within their patrol zone, though at the far edge. Would take the fleet for days to reach them at maximum speed. "Sir," Lisa said quietly, "there's something else about this transmission. The way they speak, the formal language patterns. They sound scared, but also very polite, almost innocent." "Doctor." Patel nodded. "The linguistic analysis suggests a peaceful culture. No military terminology in their vocabulary base. They use words like harmony and growth, but nothing related to warfare or violence." Jake considered the situation. The human fleet was well-equipped and had been looking for a chance to test their capabilities against real opposition. The political situation back on Earth was pushing for more aggressive expansion, which meant proving their military effectiveness to secure funding and support. "What's our current strength?" he asked. Commander Phillips consulted his tactical display. 12 heavy cruisers, including the Vengeance, 8 destroyers, and the Dreadnought Retribution. Full crew complement of 3,000 personnel, all ships at combat readiness. Ammunition and supplies? Fully stocked. We could engage in sustained combat operations for weeks without resupply. Jake made his decision. "Send a reply to the Zealothe. Tell them we're responding to their request and will arrive in 4 days. All ships are to prepare for combat operations." The bridge erupted in controlled activity as officers began implementing the order. Jake returned to his command chair and activated the fleet communication system. "Attention all ships. This is Captain Morrison. We have received a distress call from an unknown alien species requesting military assistance against hostile forces. This represents both a first contact situation and a potential combat engagement." He paused, letting that sink in throughout. "The fleet. The enemy appears to be a destroyer fleet with significant capabilities. The potential rewards are substantial. All ships will converge on the provided coordinates and prepare for combat operations. Department heads report to your captains for detailed briefings." The response was immediate and enthusiastic. The human fleet had been conducting peaceful missions for months, and the crews were eager for some action. These were professional soldiers who had trained for years without seeing real combat. On the destroyer U.S. Lightning, Captain Steve Parker addressed his crew over the internal communication system. "People, this is what we trained for. Enemy, unknown capabilities, but they've picked a fight with someone under human protection. Let's show them why that was a mistake." Aboard the heavy cruiser U.S. Thunder, Chief Engineer Ben Carter supervised the loading of additional ammunition. "Double-check all weapon systems," he ordered his team. "I want every gun working perfectly when we arrive." The Dreadnought Retribution, flagship of the fleet, became a hive of activity as Admiral Helen Brooks coordinated the overall operation. The massive ship carried enough firepower to crack a moon. Its crew was preparing to use every bit of it. Dr. Maya Patel worked with her science team to analyze every piece of data they had about both the Zealothi and the Krex. The energy. Readings from their crystal technology are fascinating, she told her staff. If we can establish good relations with these aliens, the technological exchange could advance our civilization by decades. Intelligence Officer Tony Rodriguez compiled threat assessments on the Krex horde. The fragments of information painted a picture of a highly aggressive species that destroyed everything in its path. They seemed to use biological technology. He reported to the command staff. Living ships, organic weapons, possibly some kind of hive mind coordination. Any weaknesses identified? Asked Commander Phillips. Unknown. Most species that encounter them don't survive to file reports. The human fleet began its journey toward the Zealothi system, ships jumping through hyperspace in coordinated waves. They traveled in a loose formation that could quickly shift to combat positioning when they arrived at their destination. During the 4-day journey, the crews prepared for battle. Weapons were tested and retested, combat simulations were run, and tactical plans were developed based on the limited intelligence available. The humans approached the situation with the methodical efficiency that had made them successful in every conflict they had ever fought. Captain Morrison spent hours reviewing first contact protocols with his senior staff. Hey, remember, these aliens asked for our help. They're paying customers, not conquered enemies. We treat them with respect until they give us reason not to. What if they're not what they seem? Asked Tony Rodriguez. This could be some kind of trap. Then we adapt, Jake replied simply. But the intelligence suggests they're genuine. Peaceful species facing extinction from a hostile enemy. Exactly the kind of situation where human intervention can make a difference. As the fleet neared its destination, excitement and tension built throughout the ships. This would be their first real test as a military force. Their first chance to prove that human expansion into the galaxy was backed by serious military capability. None of them realized they were about to encounter the most peaceful species in the galaxy, being so gentle that the very sight of human military forces would terrify them almost as much as their original enemies. The cultural shock waiting for both species would challenge everything they thought they knew about the universe. The die was cast, and the human Deathworlder Armada was coming to answer the call. The Zealothi monitoring stations detected the approaching fleet 7 hours before arrival. What appeared on their sensors made no sense to beings who had never seen military vessels designed for actual warfare. Sensor operator Meltha stared at her displays in growing confusion and fear. Hi, Counselor. You need to see this immediately, she called across the crystal chamber that served as their command center. Vexara floated over to the monitoring station, her translucent form rippling with concerned patterns. What are you seeing? Human fleet, Counselor. But these readings cannot be correct. Meltha's voice trembled as she pointed to the holographic display. 12 massive vessels, each one larger than our biggest city ships. They are covered in what appears to be heavy armor plating and studded with weapon emplacements. Other Zealothi gathered around the display, their musical voices rising in frightened harmony. The approaching ships looked nothing like the elegant vessels they were used to seeing from other civilized species. These were dark, angular constructions that seemed designed for one purpose only: destruction. Perhaps the sensors are malfunctioning, suggested Chief Engineer Morden, though his own voice lacked conviction. Surely no civilized species would build such aggressive-looking vessels. I have run diagnostics 3 times, Meltha replied. The readings are accurate. Each ship shows energy signatures powerful enough to destroy a moon. They carry weapons that could crack our planet's crust. Elder Quionum floated forward on his anti-grav platform, his ancient crystalline form flickering with patterns of deep thought. Have they responded to our communications? Yes, Elder, Communications Specialist Corvin said from his station. Their message was brief, but unusual in tone. He played the recording for the assembled council. Captain Morrison's voice filled the chamber with its blunt military cadence. Zealothi Command, this is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth. Fleet, we are inbound to deal with your Krex problem. Prepare for military consultation upon arrival. Morrison out. The simple, aggressive tones sent waves of anxiety through every zealothy present. There was no poetry in the human language, no musical quality, no attempt at diplomatic courtesy. Just direct, harsh communication that sounded more like a threat than an offer of assistance. Deal with our Krex problem, repeated Vexera slowly. They speak as if destroying an entire enemy fleet is a simple task. Maybe it is for them, whispered young archivist Nixella. Look at those ships. They are built for war. The hours passed slowly as the human fleet approached. The zealothy prepared their finest reception chamber and assembled their most respected council members. They had no idea what to expect from their hired protectors, but they hoped diplomatic courtesy might ease. What was clearly going to be a difficult first contact? When the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zephyr Prime system. The cultural shock was immediate and overwhelming for both species. The humans stared in amazement at what appeared before them. The Zalethi civilization was unlike anything in their databases. Crystal cities floated like delicate soap bubbles. In the orange clouds of the gas giant, connected by graceful bridges that seemed to be made of solid light, art installations drifted between the cities, creating patterns of beauty that had no practical purpose except to please the eye. My God, breathed Dr. Maya Patel from her position on the bridge of the Vengeance. It's beautiful. The entire civilization is a work of art. Commander Phillips studied the tactical displays with growing confusion. Captain, I'm not reading any defensive installations. No weapons platforms, no military bases, no orbital defense grids, nothing. They must be hidden, suggested Tony Rodriguez. Advanced civilizations often conceal their military assets. But as the human sensors conducted deeper scans, it became clear that there were no hidden weapons. The Zealothi had built a civilization based entirely on creation and beauty, with no thought given to defense or warfare. Meanwhile, the Zealothi were experiencing their own shock at the sight of the human vessels. Up close, the ships looked even more terrifying than they had on sensors. The lead vessel, which they would learn was called the Vengeance, bristled with weapon ports and armored sections. It moved through space with the predatory grace of a hunting beast. They are coming to dock, reported Corvin. A small shuttle has detached from the lead ship. How many beings aboard the shuttle? Asked Vexera. The sensors indicate 6 life forms, but the readings are ... strange. Very dense bone structure. High muscle mass, elevated metabolic rates. These creatures appear to be built for physical combat. The shuttle that approached the main docking platform was itself a marvel of military engineering. Where Zealothi vessels were smooth and flowing, this craft was all sharp angles and reinforced. Plating. It touched down with mechanical precision that spoke of long practice in potentially hostile environments. The docking bay had been decorated with the finest crystal formations and artistic displays the Zealothi could arrange. Soft music played from hidden speakers, creating an atmosphere of peace and welcome. A delegation of their most honored citizens waited to greet their saviors. When the shuttle's doors opened, the waiting Zealothi took an involuntary step backward. Captain? Jake Morrison emerged first, and his appearance was shocking to beings who had never seen a predator species. He stood nearly 7 feet tall, with broad shoulders and visible muscle mass that spoke of a lifetime of physical training. His eyes moved constantly, scanning for threats with the automatic awareness of someone who had evolved on a dangerous world. Behind him came Commander Phillips, Dr. Patel, Tony Rodriguez, and 2 Marine escorts. Each human was massive by Zealothi standards, their dense bone structure and heavy musculature making them look like walking weapons. They moved with controlled precision, every step calculated and purposeful. The cultural differences were immediately apparent in how each species approached the meeting. The Zealothi floated gracefully, their movements flowing and artistic. The humans walked with military bearing, their boots striking the crystal floor with sounds that seemed unnaturally loud in the delicate environment. Greetings, Vexera managed, her voice barely steady as she performed the traditional Zealothi welcome gesture. We are deeply grateful for your response to our plea for assistance. I am High Counselor Vexara of the Crystal Reach. Jake Morrison looked around the reception area, taking in the delicate architecture and complete absence of anything resembling a weapon or defensive position. His experienced eyes saw beauty, but also vulnerability that made him uncomfortable. "Captain." "Jake Morrison, United Earth Fleet," he replied with characteristic directness. "Where are your weapons?" The question hung in the air like a physical presence. Every zealothy in the chamber felt the weight of it, the implication that something fundamental was wrong with their civilization. We do not have weapons," Vexara admitted, her voice growing smaller. "We are a peaceful people. We have never had need of such things." Jake exchanged glances with his officers. Commander Phillips looked incredulous while Dr. Patel was rapidly scanning the aliens with her medical instruments. Tony Rodriguez was already calculating threat assessments and defense strategies for beings who had apparently never considered the possibility of violence. "No weapons at all," Jake pressed. "No police force, no military, no way to defend yourselves." "Resolve conflicts through discussion and meditation," Elder Quinham said, though his ancient voice trembled with growing realization of how inadequate that sounded to these warrior beings. Dr. Patel looked up from her scanner readings, her face pale. "Captain, their bone density is about 1/3 of baseline human normal. Muscle mass is minimal. They're physically fragile by our standards." The humans looked at each other with expressions that made the zealothy even more nervous. These were not the civilized warrior diplomats they had imagined hiring. These were something far more dangerous beings, who had clearly evolved in an environment where violence was a daily reality. "Let me get this straight," Commander Phillips said slowly. "You called us here to fight off an invasion fleet, but you have no military experience, no weapons, and no way to defend yourselves." "We had hoped to hire your services as protectors," Vexara said, her desperation beginning to show. "Our databases indicated you were warriors from a stable world. We assumed you would be civilized in your approach to warfare." Jake Morrison began to laugh, a sound that made every zealothy in the room flinch. It was not a cruel laugh, but it carried undertones that spoke of violence and danger barely held in check. "Lady," he said, still chuckling, "we're from Earth. It's what you might call a death world." The cultural briefing session took place in the largest council chamber of the Crystal City. The zealothy had arranged their finest furniture and art pieces, hoping to create an atmosphere of civilized discussion. Creaked ominously under their weight, while the zealothy floated at what they hoped was a safe distance. The contrast between the two species was startling. The delicate, translucent zealothy moved like living poetry, their forms shifting with graceful patterns of color and light. The humans sat with military precision. Their dense frames radiating contained power that made the air itself seem heavy with potential violence. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Commander Phillips said, his voice carefully controlled as he reviewed the information they had gathered. "You have no military forces of any kind, no weapons, no defensive systems, no training in combat of any sort?" "We have never needed such things," replied Elder Quinham, his ancient voice trembling slightly. "We are a peaceful people. We have always resolved our differences through meditation, discussion, and artistic expression."
"Doctor?"
Maya Patel looked up from her scanner, her medical instruments having completed their analysis of the alien physiology. "Captain, their bone structure is even more fragile than I initially thought. Average bone density is 30% of human normal. Muscle mass is negligible. Their entire species appears to be built for a low-gravity, non-violent environment." Tony Rodriguez studied his tactical assessment pad. "Sir, based on physical capabilities alone, a single human marine could probably fight off dozens of these beings. They're essentially living artwork." The humans exchanged looks that made every zealothy in the chamber increasingly nervous. These were not expressions of contempt or cruelty, but rather the calculating stares of predators trying to understand prey that had somehow learned to talk. "And you called us here to fight the Krex horde," Jake Morrison said, not quite making it a question. "We had hoped to hire your services as protectors, High Counselor," Vexara admitted, her musical voice growing smaller with each word. "Our databases indicated that your species possessed advanced military capabilities. We assumed you would be civilized warriors who could negotiate with the Kreks or drive them away through superior technology. The silence that followed was broken by a sound that made every Zealothy flinch. Captain Morrison had begun to chuckle again, and this time his crew joined in. It was not malicious laughter, but it carried undertones that spoke of experiences these gentle beings could not even imagine. "Civilized warriors," repeated Commander Phillips, shaking his head. "Ma'am, we appreciate the compliment, but you need to understand something about humans." Chief Engineer Ben Carter, who had arrived with the second shuttle, leaned forward with what he probably thought was a reassuring smile. The expression only made the Zealothy more nervous. "Lady, we're from a planet that spent 4 billion years trying to kill everything that lived on it. Earth is what the galaxy calls a death world."
Oh, what exactly is a death world?
Whispered young Archivist Nixella, though she was not sure she wanted to know the answer. "A planet that actively tries to murder its inhabitants," Tony Rodriguez replied. "With disturbing cheerfulness, Earth throws everything at us that you can imagine, and plenty that you can't. Hurricanes that can level cities, earthquakes that crack continents, volcanoes that block out the sun, floods that reshape coastlines. The weather alone would kill most galactic species," added Dr. Patel. "Temperatures that swing from deadly cold to killing heat. Radiation from our sun that would fry unprotected skin, an atmosphere that's technically poisonous to most life forms. Then there are the predators," Ben Carter continued, his grin getting wider. "Creatures that hunt in, packs animals with venom that can drop a human in seconds, parasites that eat you from the inside out. We share our world with things that consider us food." The Zealothy listened in growing horror as the humans casually described a world that sounded like a nightmare. Their own gas giant was peaceful and stable, with gentle winds and abundant resources. The idea of a planet that constantly threatened its inhabitants was almost beyond their comprehension. "But surely your civilization has moved beyond such primitive conditions," Elder Quinum said hopefully. "You have advanced technology, space, travel, organized society." "Well, we've got all that, Jake," Morrison agreed. "But we earned it by being tougher, meaner, and more stubborn than everything that tried to kill us. We're the species that looked at the apex predators of our world and decided they looked tasty. We domesticated wolves," Commander Phillips added, "turned the pack hunters into pets that sleep on our beds and protect our children. We hunt creatures that could tear us apart with their bare claws," Tony Rodriguez said. "For sport, we eat poison for fun and call it spicy food," Ben Carter concluded. "We jump out of perfectly good aircraft for entertainment and consider it relaxing." The horrified silence that followed was broken by the sudden wailing of alarm klaxons throughout the Crystal City. The sound sent patterns of panic racing across every Zealothy face as emergency lights began flashing in the chamber. "Communication specialist," Corvinus' voice crackled over the intercom system from the monitoring station. "Hi, Counselor. The Kreks fleet has arrived, or dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system." Through the transparent crystal walls of the council chamber, points of dark light began appearing against the orange clouds of the gas giant's atmosphere. As the beings inside watched, the lights resolved into shapes that made the humans reach instinctively for weapons that were not there. While the Zealothy cowered in terror, the Kreks' bioships were nightmares made manifest. Each vessel was the size of a small moon, but unlike the geometric precision of human military craft, these were organic monstrosities that pulsed with malevolent life. Their hulls were covered in what looked like scales and chitinous armor, while weapon pods that resembled massive teeth and claws jutted out at irregular intervals. 12 biodreadnoughts, Tony Rodriguez reported, checking his portable tactical display. Each one massing about what we'd expect from a heavy battlecruiser, but with organic technology we don't fully understand. The lead bioship opened. Communication channels, and the voice that filled the chamber was like the sound of grinding bone mixed with screaming metal. The translation systems struggled to render the alien language into something comprehensible. "Attention, Crystal Builders," the Kreks commander hissed. "We are the harvest fleet of the 12th spawning. Your system contains resources we require. Surrender immediately, and your consumption will be swift. Resist, and we will feed on your fear before we devour your flesh." The message continued for several minutes, describing in graphic detail what the Kreks intended to do to the Zealothi population. They spoke of slavery, experimentation, and slow consumption of both physical and mental essence. It was not just conquest they offered, but complete annihilation of everything the Zealothi had ever been. The gentle beings in the chamber trembled with terror as the alien voices promised horrors beyond their comprehension. Their beautiful civilization, built over thousands of years, was about to be torn apart by creatures that existed solely to destroy and consume. But something had changed in the atmosphere of the room. The humans were no longer sitting casually in their chairs. Captain Morrison had stood slowly, his expression shifting from amusement to something far more dangerous. His crew was rising as well, their movements taking on the coordinated precision of a pack preparing for a hunt. "Gentlemen," Jake said quietly, his voice carrying a tone that made even the terrified Zealothi stop trembling for a moment. The smile that crossed his face was not the reassuring expression of a civilized protector. It was the grin of an apex predator that had just spotted worthy prey. The battle for Zephyr Prime lasted exactly 47 minutes and 12 seconds. For the Krex Horde, it was the shortest and most devastating defeat in their long history of conquest. For the humans, it was barely enough time to properly warm up their weapons systems. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Vengeance, watching the Krex bioships spread into their traditional attack formation. The organic vessels moved with the slow confidence of predators who had never faced serious resistance. Their hulls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that were probably meant to inspire terror in their usual victims. "All ships report ready for combat," announced Commander Phillips from his position at the tactical station. "Weapons charged, shields at maximum, engines running hot, range to target?" Jake asked. 200,000 kilometers and closing. The bioships are maintaining their approach speed. They don't seem concerned about our presence." Jake smiled grimly. "They will be. Open a channel to the Krex fleet." 8. The communications officer established the connection, and Jake's voice carried across space to the alien commanders, Krex vessels. "This is Captain Morrison of the United Earth Fleet. You have 30 seconds to reverse course and leave this system. This is your only warning." The response came back immediately, filled with the grinding, hissing sounds of the alien language. The translation made it clear that the Krex found the human warning amusing. "Small metal ships," the Krex commander replied. "You are not part of our harvest plan. Leave now, and we may allow you to live as servants. Remain and be consumed." "I tried to be polite," Jake muttered, then raised his voice to address the fleet. "All ships, weapons free. Let's show these overgrown bacteria what a real predator looks like." Human fleet accelerated toward the Krex formation, their engines blazing trails of superheated plasma across the dark of space. The bioships responded by launching their first wave of attacks. Organic missiles that could phase through most energy shields and burrow into ship hulls like living parasites. Against most galactic species, this opening salvo would have been devastating. The phase shift capability of the bioweapons allowed them to bypass conventional defenses. Their organic nature made them nearly impossible to track with standard sensors. The humans were not most galactic species. "Incoming biomissiles. Phase shift capable," reported Tony Rodriguez from his sensor station. "Standard countermeasures will be ineffective." "Then we don't use standard countermeasures," Jake replied calmly. "All ships activate point defense clusters. Manual targeting, full saturation fire." The human ships erupted in defensive fire as hundreds of small-caliber weapons opened up simultaneously. Instead of trying to track individual missiles, they simply filled the space around their vessels with a wall of high-velocity projectiles. The organic weapons, designed to phase through energy shields, had no defense against old-fashioned kinetic impacts. Biomissiles exploded by the dozen as they ran into the defensive fire. The few that made it through struck armor plating that had been designed to withstand the weapons of other human ships. Opponents who understood the science of destruction far better than any biological entity. "Direct hits on multiple ships," reported the damage control officer. "Minimal penetration." "The bioweapons are designed for softer targets." "Of course they are," Jake said. These things have been bullying peaceful species for so long, they've forgotten how to fight someone who shoots back. All ships advanced to close quarters. Human fleet drove straight into the Krex formation, their plasma cannons carving through biomatter like hot knives through butter. The aliens had never faced an opponent that actively sought close combat, that treated a larger enemy as a target of opportunity rather than a threat to be avoided. On the destroyer, U.S. Lightning, Captain Steve Parker coordinated his ship's attack on one of the smaller bio-vessels. "Target their weapon clusters," he ordered. "Those tooth-like projections are probably their main guns." The Lightning's weapons focused on specific points on the alien ship's hull, pouring concentrated fire into areas that looked vulnerable. The bioship's armor began to regenerate almost immediately, but not fast enough to keep up with the sustained barrage. "Interesting," observed Dr. Maya Patel from her position on the Vengeance's bridge. "Their hulls can heal, but only at a limited rate. Sustained fire overwhelms their regeneration capability." The Krex were learning the same lesson. Their bioships had been designed to terrify and overwhelm weaker opponents through sheer size and frightening appearance against enemies who had evolved to hunt creatures larger than themselves. Intimidation was useless. Chief Engineer Ben Carter's voice crackled over the comm system from the UES Thunder. "Captain Morrison, the big one in the center is trying to ram us. Should we evade?" "Negative," Jake replied with predatory satisfaction. "All heavy cruisers, prepare for ramming speed. Let's see who's tougher, their living ships or our dead metal." The collision between human and Krex vessels created explosions visible from 3 star systems away. The organic ships, despite their impressive size, had evolved in the depths of space where impacts were rare. Human vessels had been built by a species that lived on a world where everything was constantly trying to kill them. The UES Vengeance struck the lead, IO ship head-on at nearly maximum velocity. The alien vessel's living hull, designed to intimidate and overwhelm, crumpled against the human ship's reinforced armor like an egg hitting a hammer. Biomatter sprayed across space as the organic vessel broke apart under the impact. Throughout the engagement, Zealothi watched from their crystal cities in amazement and growing horror. The humans fought with a savage efficiency that was both beautiful and terrifying to witness. They moved like a pack of wolves, coordinating their attacks with predatory intelligence that spoke of millions of years of evolutionary pressure. "They are not trying to disable the enemy's ships," observed Sensor Operator Meltha, her voice filled with awe. "They are hunting them." High Counselor Vexera watched the battle through the transparent walls of the council chamber. "Look how they move," she whispered. "Each ship knows where the others are without needing to communicate. They fight as a single organism." The Krex, for their part, were experiencing something they had never felt before: genuine fear. Their bioships were being systematically destroyed by opponents who seemed to enjoy the violence. Every tactical advantage they had relied on for centuries was proving useless against these metal predators. "Out of these creatures," screamed the surviving Krex commander over the communications channel. "No species fights like this. No one seeks close combat with superior numbers. This is not how civilized beings conduct warfare." Captain Morrison's response was broadcast on all frequencies, reaching not just the fleeing Krex but every monitoring station within 50 light-years. "We're humans, from a little planet called Earth, and you just learned why the universe should be very careful about who it picks a fight with." As the last bioship broke apart under concentrated fire from 3 human destroyers, an eerie quiet fell over the Zephyr Prime system. The Krex horde, which had terrorized the galaxy for generations, had been completely annihilated in less than an hour. The human fleet began to regroup, their ships showing minimal damage despite the ferocity of the engagement. On every vessel, crews were already conducting post-battle assessments and preparing for whatever might come next in the crystal cities of the Zealothi. A different kind of fear was beginning to take hold. They had been saved, but by creatures that had just demonstrated a capacity for violence beyond anything in their experience. The gentle beings who had called for help now faced the question of what to do with the deadly predators they had summoned. High Counselor Vexara prepared to greet their saviors, wondering if they had simply traded one form of destruction for another. But as she watched Captain Morrison's shuttle approach the docking platform, she noticed something that gave her hope. The human weapons were powering down. The predators were putting away their claws. Perhaps these Deathworlders understood the difference between enemies and innocents after all.